Okay, so welcome to the lecture on circular business models. This is, so to say, a non-lecture actually. The idea here is not that I give you extensive input on this particular topic, but I reverse the classroom. So you are in charge of teaching yourselves, you meaning the whole group. So don't take this particular task lightly. So the homework given to you is quite important at the end of this lecture, and it's up to you to do it, but don't be surprised if I ask some questions based on what should have been done in the homework at the end of the day. But if you indeed finish the task of doing this particular assignment, then of course we will open the floor to discussion and we can learn a lot more than what could ever be covered in lectures. Okay, so for any business model, you always ask the questions here. What is the value that is being provided and to whom it is provided? So that's the value proposition. And how is the value being provided? That's the value creation and delivery part. And how the company which creates such values capture revenue out of it. That's the value capture part. So this is generic for any business model. Okay. So for a CBM, circular business model, is essentially a business model which creates captures such value inside a circular economic system, right? So it can do so by multiple methodologies. So it can either do so by sticking to the loops of circular economy. We have already talked about the loops a lot, and it can do so by postponing or reversing obsolescence. What does that mean? I have already explained to you in the previous lecture. So essentially by having some sort of a circular strategy in terms of the material flows, the circular business models are constructed to operate in let's say in the world of circular economy. So broadly speaking, there are four values in circular business models, but this is one type of taxonomy. There can be other types one could come up with, but let's just stick to this. So it can be either economic or sourcing value, it can be an environmental value, it can be a customer value or an informational value, okay? So when you talk about economic or sourcing value, essentially you are talking about the loops in which instead of using, extracted raw materials, you try to use with this power of the loops, you bring down the cost, right? Instead of going through all the way from ores to extraction to coming back to the product, you just try to utilize the power of the loops to minimize waste, to minimize risk, to minimize cost. So this kind of reduced raw material consumption comes under the sourcing value. Okay, and in terms of an environmental value for a company, it can be that of reduced ecological footprints. We talked a lot about footprints, right? So it could be a consequence of a reduced ecological footprint through let's say an innovative, environmentally sustainable product or a process, right? So at the end of the day, this helps the company to build up a, let's say, a green image and then capture the market. And then it could be either through customer value. It can be due to the customer satisfaction or customer loyalty. For instance, if you are encouraging remanufacture, if you are encouraging them to bring the products back, and then this can be resulting in lower disposal cost. For instance, they don't need to spend money to actually dispose some complex equipments. Rather, you can say that, oh, we are going to take care of it at the end of the life. So that could be one aspect of customer value. And then you have the information value, which I think is very critical in a circular business model. See, if you want to repair or remanufacture, refurbish, or whatever you want to do, you want to know a lot about the product, right? So if you run a product, you want to know at which point it fails and how it fails. So when a customer brings you let's say a product at a failed state, you sort of do post-mortem analysis to find out how the product fails. And more number of customers bringing you more type of, let's say, points of failure, you learn a lot about your product, which means like it becomes easier over time to sort of repair or refurbish or do whatnot. But also, if you have such kind of informational knowledge in you, so the knowledge is so critical that you can use that and channel that to design innovative processes and then create and come up with designs which are longer lasting, right? So that is captured in the informational value. Okay, so there are many taxonomies which exist for CVMs, and I chose this one, but you have to know that there are many different taxonomies, many different types of classifications, okay? So essentially, this taxonomy gives you 4 different strategies: cycling, extending, intensifying, and dematerializing. So let's see the first 2 in this slide and the next 2 in the next. See, I don't need to go through almost any of it because we have covered all of it in many different forms in the previous lecture. I'll just give you, let's say, the hinting words are really the important core so that you get the idea and then you can read more about it. When it comes to cycling, you're looking at the word taking back here. Okay, if you want to have reuse, repair, remanufacture, refurbish, whatnot. The key value proposition here is that you kind of promise a sort of take back of some kind of the product that you have produced, and you can go through these one or the other form of the loop so that you can actually repair or remanufacture the product and then bring them back into the market. Okay, and essentially this results in, for instance, reduced cost, reduced material input, but also there are many ways you can imagine it. Okay, so imagine you have production of X or Y, like material or a product, and imagine you create a residue during the production process. Okay, so typically a residue which is usually landfilled or thrown away, but you as a company come up with a process and say that, oh, see, this particular residue has another integral component for a different product. So for instance, I'll give you an example. Bauxite residues in aluminum production are a huge problem. Okay, so they have created environmental disasters, but they can also be viewed as an important source of scandium, which is critical to clean tech. So you can either view that particular waste as, let's say, an environmental disaster waiting for us, or you can say that we are going to take responsibility and do recycling and take away the most important metal from there through an innovative process. So that could be part of, let's say, the cycling strategy. And in case of extending, the key word, in my opinion, you are looking at is the use phase. So we talked about this too in remanufacturing in detail, remember? And when I say use phase, what it essentially means is this. In extending strategy, you want to create long-lasting products, right? It's as simple as that. So that you can capture the revenue from, let's say, by designing a really high quality product which can last for a long period of time. And how can you generate revenue during that particular extended period life? You can offer them contracts for maintenance, you can offer them contracts for repair, for services, and you can probably monitor the state of health of such particular products using a digital capabilities. That's how you create this particular value. So you get the idea, you get the gist. Essentially, you want to have the maintenance of the stock here, and you want to create long-lasting product, and there are multiple strategies to capture the revenue here. So continuing along this line with the 2 other strategies, intensifying and dematerializing, I think this too doesn't require much explanations. It's basically we will go a little bit into detail about product service systems in the next 2 slides, but a lot of sharing models and these leasing models come under intensifying. So you have a product the same amount of product and you could get a lot more of functionality, a lot more of usage out of it. So for instance, using or selling product as a service comes under this category of intensifying, and you could see how you could build up profit margins from such kind of strategy as well. We already also talked about dematerializing. So for instance, instead of using a lot of hardware, you could try to sometimes replace it with software in some specific case examples. Again, I refrain from giving examples because that is your task for this particular lecture. So yeah, you could also see we already talked about dematerializing in the past as well. We gave few concrete examples of dematerializing, so you could see how you can actually have dematerializing. So a part of dematerializing is also education and trying to reduce demand. So also take into account, for instance, usage of public transportation instead of everybody owning a car can also be called as dematerialization. So anyways, these are the 4 important strategies in terms of CBMs. So let's now go into let's say a zoomed in look into product service systems. Okay, product service systems can either be, let's say, product oriented, use oriented, or result oriented. So in terms of product oriented, it's something that is conventional and that we are used to. We are sold the product and that's about it. And there could be a few extra services. So I'll come back to what these services could be in the next slide. And then in use oriented, the important distinction is that the provider, the one who is providing the product, they actually have the ownership of the product. Okay, and then there are let's say 3 archetypal types of use oriented, which will come in the next slide. And in the result oriented, the client and the provider, they agree upon a result, not on, let's say, a sale of a product or anything else, but on a very specific outcome that they actually agree upon. Okay, there are 8 archetypal PSS. The first 2 belongs to the product oriented PSS. So for instance, these 2, when it comes to product related service, you are still selling a product, but let's say to top it up, you add maybe a maintenance contract, or you say that these are the consumables we are going to keep supplying to you over a period of time. And it could also include advising and consultancy. For instance, let's say you are selling an instrument to a large company and they need your advice to have, let's say, highly efficient process. Then you provide such kind of advices during the operations. Then that could also be coming under product oriented. You still sell a product and the user owns the product, but then you give some advice to improve its efficiency. And when it comes to use oriented, these 3 are the things that come under use oriented. I'm sorry, I'm terrible at drawing these things, but you get the idea. So it could be either product lease. So you know the provider owns the product for use oriented in all these 3 categories, where the user kind of pays for a particular period of time and they have unlimited individual access to such a product. And it can be either product renting or sharing, which means it is having a sequential use by number of users. So tempted to give examples, but think about it on your own. So not everybody using it at the same time, but sequentially. And it can be product pooling, where people are using such a product simultaneously. So what is the uniting factor in all these 3? The provider owns the product. Okay. It can also be result oriented. So in this category, it's these 3. I should have used in a different color. Okay. These 3. Anyways, here they agree upon a result. So it could be either activity management or outsourcing. For instance, let's say you are arranging I'm giving an example, but let's say you're arranging wedding and then you want to have catering from outside. Okay, so you agree with the catering company that the food will be served. That's the end result. It can be pay per service, very easy, numerous examples. You have printouts from these Xerox machines that you pay for, or you can have a functional result that you agree upon. Let's say that you are a farmer and in your farming, instead of, let's say, somebody selling you pesticide as a product, they tell you, oh, we are going to give you such kind of harvesting results due to these kind of practices that we are going to show how it can be done. So that could be an example of functional results. I am tempted to give an example from that of a cricket match, but not many of you will be familiar with cricket. Anyways, so for all these 3 different categories, you see 8 types of product service systems. And you could come up with a lot of examples for every single one of them, right? So what do you need to do? Look, this homework, try to do it, please, because I don't give you, let's say, very detailed examples of circular business models, because that is not something you can just go over as someone teaching you. You have to understand it by doing it on your own. And when you discuss it, your understanding gets better. So I'll open the forum, I'll upload the lecture. Please discuss it among yourselves. So form groups, maximum 10. Let's say you have to come up with at least 7 examples of circular business models. You can look all over the internet. There is no shortage of people portraying their business practice or their business model as circular. So don't worry that you will be falling short of examples. You will have a lot to choose from. And when you have chosen such an example, create the table of value proposition, value creation, and value capture. What are the core values that they are actually having within their model, and how did they try to create such a value, and how are they trying to capture economic revenue in competitive market through such a value. And I showed you 4 strategies, right? So in which particular strategy of circular business model is it falling under, and why do you think so? And if it's a part of a product service system, let's say a car sharing or so on that you chose, then explain to me in which part does it fall and why you think so. So once you have, let's say, formulated an example and identified values and identified the strategies and identified which type and form it belongs to in PSS, if at all it belongs to PSS, then you have a very clear idea on that circular business model. Then there could be already somebody who has done circularity analysis by using a quantitative indicator. If you already find that, add it. If you don't, doesn't matter. Finally, when I introduce to you the criticisms on circular economy, take these CBMs that you have created and then try to see if any of the criticisms apply. You could also already think about critically viewing circular business models if you want to do that. If not, it's totally fine. Just try to define it. Once again, I just gave you, let's say, conceptual frameworks. I'm not giving you any examples very deliberately. So come up with examples on your own, search in the internet, and then create such sort of, let's say, a table or categorization, and then post it to the forum, discuss it amongst yourself, and let's see if you got them right. Like if some of your colleagues tell you that, okay, maybe this is not the value I think is captured inside this particular CBM, but it's something else, then you have a back and forth, you have a conversation. So most important here is to have a dialogue with your colleagues, with your friends in the forums, and to see how you can understand circular business models. When we move on to recycling, when we move on to criticisms on CE and the policy, it will be just me giving you lectures and reading materials, right? You just understand from the lectures because they are predetermined processes. But this is a dynamic one when it comes to CBM. You can have a lot of discussions. So good luck. Let's see how it goes.